Welcome to our Academic Opportunities Night. We are thrilled to see everyone here this evening. And again, we appreciate your time this November Monday. Whether you found academic challenge and engagement at your current school and you want to go even further, or you're yearning for it at your next school, we're delighted to have an opportunity to share more about the intellectual adventures our students and teachers undertake together at Commonwealth. To that end, we've designed this evening's program to give you a chance to hear from and ask questions of teachers in a range of departments and subjects. During the information session portion of the event, so just a little later on, you can also connect with students who have volunteered to represent subjects like computer science, English, chemistry, and more. I also want to note that the visual and performing arts have an important place in our program. While we won't focus on them this evening, you can learn more about the arts at our next event, plus extracurricular offerings, and that will take place on Tuesday, November 17th. And I know a lot of you are already registered. We encourage you to attend. If you like what you learned this evening, we also invite you to schedule an interview with a member of our admissions committee. We're booking into December and we would really welcome the chance to get to know you a bit better and explore how your interests match our programs through a one-on-one Zoom conversation. Tonight and in the future, please know that we're here to support you. No question is too small. There's no such thing as a silly question. And we're always happy to troubleshoot and chat. During the admissions process, we hope that you'll identify Commonwealth as a place where you can grow and thrive these next few years. And we thank you for taking time tonight to explore. Now I'd like to introduce our headmaster, Mr. Bill Wharton, who will share a few words of welcome before turning things over to our assistant head of school, Ms. Rebecca Jackman. She'll introduce herself and Commonwealth's academic program, and then she'll kick off our department presentations. Mr. Wharton, take it away.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. My job, I always see part of my job is keeping my speeches and talks as short as possible, and especially at an event like this. It's really hearing from the teachers and from the students where you'll get the best sense of what Commonwealth is about and about the kind of academic community we have. This is, it's become cliche to say that this is not the way we're usually used to interacting with people. Commonwealth is known as a place with a distinctive academic program and teachers and students who are really excited about the work that they do. But it's also a place that's a pretty special, that is a special community. And it's very much a face-to-face community. So since March, we've been challenged, but we've made the best of this situation. We've carried on. And it was good last fall that we'd had 3 quarters together before we had to go fully remote. And that we've been able to operate in hybrid mode this year has allowed the forming of the kinds of bonds that really make learning a group adventure at Commonwealth. So I really hope that you'll get some sense of that from this evening, and that when, and I'm knocking on wood, we're able to resume school in person. By the time some of you are members of our community, that you'll be able to see firsthand what Commonwealth's face-to-face community really is like. So thank you for coming, and I hope tonight proves helpful to you.
Thank you, Bill. Great. My name, as Carrie said, is Rebecca Jackman. I am assistant head of school, and I began life at Commonwealth, what I realized is 20 academic years ago, which feels like a long time. I started as a chemistry teacher and I continue to teach chemistry. So come to to chat with me and my colleagues about chemistry later on. But my job this evening and my big role at the school is as assistant head and sort of really helping to oversee our academic program. And so before you hear from our department conveners, I wanted to give just a sense of sort of high-level sense of our academic program. And I think we really like to think at Commonwealth of our program as being one that really is a full liberal arts education. We have fairly significant graduation requirements across the curriculum. And I think our curriculum stretches, engages, and challenges all of our students in different ways at different moments. And in many ways, I think it's really, as a small school, we're really able to tailor that experience to each individual student. And maybe Jess, could you share the slides that I have, maybe the second slide even, just to give people a sense of when we think about our academic program, there are really sort of 5 major subject areas that we think about: English, history, language, math, and science. And all of our students are taking classes in those areas each year. And all of our students are also engaged, as Carrie mentioned, in the arts every year and in sports. So those are another piece of the education. But really what the program looks like depends on exactly how you arrive at Commonwealth. So we have students who arrive never having taken a language before. We have students who arrive having taken and ready to enter a calculus class. And part of the beauty of being a small school is that we're really able to tailor programs to that. So most of our students start in, for example, a geometry class in their 9th grade year. But others start in intermediate algebra or calculus. So there's a variety. And this slide really sort of shows you what does the 9th grade look like and what do things look like as students progress through the curriculum. These are our graduation requirements. And really, one of the things that I think you'll hear from our students this evening is that because of the different points at which students enter our curriculum, they are often in mixed level classes. So really only our English and history classes tend to be single grade. The rest of them are a mixture of 9s, 10s, 11s, whatever it might be. So you're getting a chance to interact with different students right from the beginning. The other pieces that means are that students really get to know one another outside of their grade level. And what this also means, and I think you can see from this chart, is that while a 9th grade curriculum is fairly circumscribed for our students, the options and the decisions students get to make about their academic program really expand as time goes on. So our 11th and 12th graders, many of them are taking multiple elective classes in different fields depending on their particular interests. And typically our students take a load of somewhere between 4 and 6 academic credits, with probably most sort of averaging around 5. But often that might be that they've decided to take a half credit of language so they can double up in science. Or maybe they've decided they're really a historian and they're going to not only take US history, but they're also going to take modern Islamic studies. So there are all kinds of different ways in which our students will tailor their programs and all kinds of different elective courses that we offer each year that really depend on both student interest and faculty expertise. So we're always balancing that as we design the next year's offerings. So I'll stop there and leave that as my introduction. And at this point, turn things over to my colleague Sasha, who is our department convener for English, and let you hear a little bit more about each of the different subject areas in more detail. So Sasha, take it away.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Sasha Eskeland. I'm the convener of the English department, and I'm just going to tell you quickly a little bit about the department and what we do. And I always feel that I have to begin by saying that I myself was educated in the Commonwealth English department as a high school student, and the rest of Commonwealth too. I graduated in 1992. And I'll say that, what I knew as a student at Commonwealth was that, first of all, I loved English. That was one thing. And then that I was reading in a way that opened up the texts we were reading in this sort of endlessly fascinating process of discovery. So as a teacher at Commonwealth, now I'm in my 6th year of teaching here, I've gotten to see and experience the sort of behind the curtain of what those teachers were doing. So we're a close reading department, which means that we're looking, as you can guess, very closely at the language of the texts we read and, analyzing them from, sort of word by word, image by image. And I just want to give you a quick example of this. I think it's the best way to understand what it is we do. So just today, I was talking with my class of seniors. We're reading Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. And we were looking at a passage about a character named Hagar. And I asked students to describe sort of what they were seeing at the level of image and diction about this character. So first they noticed that there were images of the moon and tides. So they said, well, she's linked to the natural world in some way. Then they said that there was violent language. And they said, oh, she's sort of like a predator. It was applied to her. And then they noticed that a lot of this language was sort of applied to her. She was the passive subject of it. She was yanked and jerked, and her heart was pounding like a fist in her chest. So the students noted that most of these were passive verbs. And so they said, well, this violence, this kind of natural world is happening to her. She's not in control of it. And then somebody said, she's undergoing a transformation. It's like she's a werewolf. And then they immediately said, oh, but not really a werewolf, but it was a wonderful moment, actually, because it brought to light this kind of tradition of literary characters who are overtaken either by emotion, by this kind of natural emotional process. And we ended up connecting her way back to Dido in the Aeneid from some of the images that we saw. But by the end of the conversation and the end of the class, we had understood something much more than just what the character was doing in the scene, which happened to be trying to murder her former boyfriend. But she, we understood much more about it in that she was bringing these elements of the sort of mythic, feminine, tradition of literature into the book, into the novel. So that's the kind of thing that we can uncover in doing close reading. I'll tell you a little bit about how the classes progress. As you saw in Rebecca's chart, students take English all the way through. They take English 9, 10, 11, and 12. In every year, so we read different things every year. I can tell you a little bit about the years. In 9th grade, students are asked to start looking very, very closely at individual words, to observe, images, colors, things that are appearing. They read a Shakespeare play in 9th grade. Sometimes they read the Odyssey. Some 9th grade classes have read Metamorphoses, Ovid's Metamorphoses. In 10th grade, we take that process of observing a little bit further. They're writing analytically all the way through, really learning to break down the text in their own words. We usually read Macbeth in 10th grade, which is a wonderful Shakespeare play to read. We read a lot of things. I can tell you more in the small rooms, like the actual texts. And then in junior year, students are looking for voice in the texts that they read. And they're also developing, to a greater degree, their own voices as writers, writing about literature. In their senior year, they have a choice between what we would call sort of regular English, English 12, which is what I teach, and Reasons for Writing, which is a course that focuses a little bit more on argumentation, on rhetorical arguments, looking at literature, all the same, but writing, looking at different forms of writing than just straight literature and poetry. So that's the progression. I hope you'll all come into the room tonight and hear from a couple of our students who are excited to talk to families and potential, prospective students about what we do.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matthew Singer. I teach computer science at Commonwealth. And so I will tell you about our computer science courses. So the computer science courses are all electives. We have 4 of them. There's so CS1 through 4. You can begin to take CS1 at any year. And the first 2 classes, CS1 and CS2, are really focused on programming and developing students as sophisticated programmers. And by sophisticated programmers, what I mean is that when anyone writes code, they are technically writing it so that a computer can understand it and run it. But when it comes to software and building large systems with code, a piece of code is written once and then read dozens, possibly hundreds, possibly even thousands of times. And so when you take that into account, what the course really tries to emphasize is that writing code for other people is the most important thing you can do, because it works. It technically runs, does not mean that it can hold bugs or other code changes, and is a sustainable piece of software and things like that. So that's really the framework that CS1 and 2 are operating from. And basically, we go through very increasingly complex levels of types of data, applying that kind of skill set too. So in the very first class of CS1, we're talking about how do you add numbers together? What do words look like? They're called strings in computer science. And then by the end of CS2, students are writing a chess game with an artificial intelligence. So, they can play against their own AI, and hopefully their AI is good enough that they lose to the AI that they've written. So the emphasis on code structure and quality enables us to kind of write those complex programs and not get lost in our own logic. Then CS3, we take a little break from the programming aspect and we begin to look at computer science theory. So that starts with a look at the foundations of discrete math, some proof techniques, counting, sets, relations, things like that. And then we use those techniques to begin to study the theoretical models of computation. So going from a deterministic finite automata, which is a simple state machine, all the way to Turing machines. And then once we know what a Turing machine is, we can talk about computability, what problems aren't computable, what problems are undecidable. And then we begin an intense discussion of algorithms, algorithms on graphs, algorithms on all sorts of stuff. And we talk about how efficient can we make these algorithms. And then CS4 is sort of the independent project class for people who started at CS1 as freshmen and then made it all the way through CS4 and are still interested in pursuing kind of their own project. And in that class, people do anything from build their own computer to write a scheduling software to help us arrange meetings at the school with a website. So yeah, it's a pretty intense, rigorous program. And if you want to find out more, please stop by the computer science chat later on.
Hi, everybody. My name is Don Connolly, and I'm a Latin teacher. So I teach the Aeneid and Latin 4, so I completely set up that moment in Sasha's class earlier today. You're very welcome. And the first thing I wanted to say is I'm a Latin teacher, but Latin is not required. That is often a question, believe it or not. It is one of 4 languages that you can take here. We have a 3-year requirement. You need to take a language for 3 years. And the languages are Latin, Spanish, French, and Mandarin. All of our modern language teachers are actually native speakers. I'm the only one not a native speaker. I once had a dream in Latin, though. And the first thing that you do is you take a placement test, because if you've had the language before, we want to put you right where you should go. And then you might be placed in the first or second year of one of those languages, or maybe even the 3rd year if you've had a lot of experience. Our languages move pretty fast. We want to get kids up to some proficiency and verging on fluency, maybe in some ambitious cases by the time they leave. The first 2 years are pretty traditional in the modern languages. It's reading, writing, speaking, and listening with increasing rigor. Of course, lots of cultural material as well. In Latin, we get through the grammar in about a little over a year and a half and do some graded readings after that. It gets more interesting in the 3rd year. I think while we continue to focus on the basic skills, there's a lot more actually literature In Spanish, the third year is largely centered around the literature and culture and politics of Peru. One of our two Spanish teachers is from Peru. And you read a lot of Peruvian writers. And in French literature, the focus is on literature from all periods, starting from Louis XIV to the present day. In Latin 4 and in Latin 3, we start to read actual literature. And I read about 5 prose authors and two poets, including Catullus and Ovid. We read some of Ovid's Metamorphoses. Mandarin, is a little bit of a longer process to acquire for English speakers. So there's just an increasing complexity, but probably working on those 4 core skills through with some, with literature as well, but through the 4 years. The 4th and 5th year, especially in French and Spanish, involve some building blocks where there are there are sort of half credit courses that you can build into one full credit course, or you can just take a half credit course if you want to just keep your language going. And those can be either in sort of a conversation class, which usually deals with a lot of politics and culture, or a literature class. And some of the themes are, in the Spanish department, they deal with Latin American and Spanish politics. Our other Spanish teacher is from Cuba, but also I think his field is sort of medieval and early modern Spanish history. He's also a walking encyclopedia. And in French, more literature of all eras and lots of projects. Our current French teacher is an accomplished actor, so he builds a lot of theater into his classes. And in some of his classes, he has students try out the very genres that they're reading. So they'll read Diderot and then write a philosophical dialogue and so forth, letters and diaries. One of the most exciting things I think about the program is that we have exchanges and trips for all the languages. So we have a Spanish in non-COVID years, of course. We have a Spanish exchange every year. We have a sister school in Spain, and in French it's every other year because the numbers are not quite as big as in Spanish, but everybody gets a chance to go. That's after French 3. I lead a trip to Italy every couple of years so that everybody in the Latin program gets a chance to go. We go to Rome and various sites around the Bay of Naples. And there's a trip to China once every few years, timed in such a way that everybody gets a chance to go at some point in their career. So you'll be able to go out to the individual rooms of each of the languages. It won't be a general rule just for languages. So you can see the French, the Spanish, Latin, and the Mandarin program in more detail. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Barb Grant, and I'm the convener for the history department. I also wanted to say that I've been here over 20 years, and both my children are happy and successful graduates of Commonwealth schools. So I'm always happy to talk about how that's a wonderful and very possible thing. So I want to talk a little bit about our history program. And it's not just Commonwealth's history program, but also I think talk more generally about what the role of history is in our world. Because our goal is to give our students a very, very deep understanding, and in a sense, another kind of close reading, like in English, of the world societies that they're living with here in the United States, as well as the world societies that we are also living among in the rest of the world. And the deepness of this program is one of the reasons why, as you noticed from what Rebecca Jackman showed, we actually start with ancient history, even though history just gets longer every single decade. We still start with ancient history because we think it's extremely important, and go on then to medieval history, which is actually my specialty and my love, because we really want people to have a very deep understanding of the cultures that exist in the world today. And almost every history course, even if it's a modern history course, will have some roots in the older periods for that reason. It's also very important to us in our department that we cover both Western culture, European culture, and American culture, but also non-Western cultures. And I'll explain as we go along a little bit of what that means. The other thing is that when I came here, Bill Wharton was still teaching history, and he always referred to the ancient history students as our ancient historians. And I really loved that The idea that our students are sort of learning to think like historians and to argue and to write like historians and to analyze what it is that historians actually do when they write history. And so that means that we focus a lot on the primary source materials from the period itself that are the basis of what is said in textbooks and what other historical studies published today are using as their evidence, and to have them think critically about what it means when a historian says that something occurred or interprets something a certain way in history, and what is the evidence for that. So that's also a very, very big part of the sort of fundamental principles of our program. To talk a little bit about the course progression, you saw a little bit of it earlier. In the 9th grade, we do ancient history. That includes not only Greece and Rome, but also the Middle East, in particular Persian culture. And then in 10th grade, we have a course which is called Medieval World History, which does not cover the entire world because we like to go deeply into things, but it does cover 4 major societies: Europe, China, Africa, and the Islamic world, which were extremely crucial at that period of time. In fact, 3 of them were much more advanced than Europe at the time, and which interacted very energetically with each other. Then in 11th grade, we do our United States history course, which is actually an AP history course, prepares you for the AP, but also we have a sort of a more creative modern US history course that is an option as well. And then that's the core: ancient, medieval, and US. But we also offer a whole sort of range of elective courses, mostly open to 11th and 12th graders, but sometimes to 10th graders as well. These are more specialized, more advanced courses. Some of them really are, in fact, modeled on sort of mid-level college courses. But the idea is to focus more on modern history, to build on the sort of ancient and medieval and early modern roots that we've already sort of laid down, and explore modern histories in the United States, in Europe, and then also in East Asia and South Asia and the Islamic world, whether that's Southeast Asia, South Asia, Central Asia, the Middle East, Brooklyn, New York, whatever. So the idea is to build on what the students already know, but use it to explore the more modern cultures in which we live. If in terms of skills, I like to talk about that a little bit because people are always interested. Well, how's their writing? How do they learn to write? What do they write? So basically, we build up their writing skills incrementally through the 3 core courses. One of the most important things I think that students learn is actually how to listen, how to listen to each other in class, and how to develop a conversation with each other in class about history. And the other thing I think equally important is how to read a primary source with a critical eye. In other words, not just accepting everything that you read, but actually analyzing point of view and the limitations of sources. Also, they learn how to read secondary sources and build up arguments based on those primary and secondary sources. We start very simply with paragraphs or groups of paragraphs and build them up slowly into short papers. And then ultimately, by the end of every year of our history curriculum, they write a research paper, each one becoming a little bit more sophisticated as they go along. And within that, they learn a lot about research. They learn a lot about how to use a library when it's not closed for COVID, about how to build a bibliography, about how to take notes, how to structure a longer argument as opposed to a short one, how to draft and redraft to kind of perfect the language of their writing as well, and their argument. So that in the end, what we hope for, here's my cat, she also goes to Commonwealth. In the end, we hope that they will really become wonderful critical thinkers and even more curious about the world in which they live. Many students, when they go on these trips that Dawn described, they talk very excitedly about seeing things in other places in the world that they'd read about in history. And that makes me feel really wonderful. So you can find out more if you visit our room later. Thank you.
My name is Chris Barcy. I teach physics at Commonwealth, and sometimes once in a while math. I've been here for 7 years, and the thing I really like about teaching at Commonwealth is that the students are really seeing stuff for the first time, and they're asking questions with a fresh pair of eyes, and it's really neat to sort of revisit some fundamental principles. And because all of the disciplines are represented tonight, I won't go into too much detail, but when students enter as 9th graders, they all take the same biology course. And in sophomore year, based on their own interests and goals and based on teacher recommendations, as well as discussions with their advisor, they can take different possible sections of chemistry as a 10th grader. And then that happens again later on in junior year as in physics. So biology, chemistry, and physics are the 3 core graduation requirements for the science program at Commonwealth. After that, there are also both full and half credit electives. There are full credit electives in each of the 3 disciplines, Bio 2, Chem 2, and Physics 2. And then there are also half credit electives, which I sort of think about as sort of special topics. There is a course on wave physics that's running this year. There's a course there's a course on environmental science. There's a really neat course that's co-taught by a chemistry teacher and the ceramicist on the 5th floor called the Art and Science of Materials, where students 1 week will go to the studio and do some art making and then go to the lab to sort of learn about what are the materials that make up that artwork. We also have various iterations of science teams and robotics teams that don't have any requirements to join, but they're clubs that are voluntary, and students sort of like to tinker in those places as well. The science department also discusses and works to find a science program that really works for each student. And to do that, we discuss in conjunction with the math department, sort of what's the right track that matches kids' interest in science with their own interest in math. And we try to make that experience the best possible one for them. And to talk about the math program a little bit, I'll hand things over to Rob Sherry.
Hello, my name is Rob Sherry, and I've been teaching math and economics at Commonwealth for 21 years. And I'm here to give you a short introduction to the math program. At Commonwealth, we believe that a strong foundation in math is fundamental to developing analytic thinking and symbolic understanding. We recognize that students come to Commonwealth with different mathematical experiences, and we aim to meet each student where they are and to present them with a challenging and enriching program. Some students start with intermediate algebra. Most 9th graders start with geometry, but we also have students who start with pre-calculus and even calculus. For most of our courses, we have 2 levels of classes, one which matches the level of an honors math class at most schools, and then another advanced level that focuses more on proofs and problem solving at an advanced level. Most students take geometry, algebra 2 pre-calculus as a combined course, and then 2 years of calculus. For advanced students, we also have theoretical math electives such as theoretical calculus, linear algebra, abstract algebra, or mathematical logic, depending on the year. Some visitors ask, how do I know which class I would start with at Commonwealth? It's hard to give a specific answer, but I can tell you that we give all incoming students a math placement test. And if you're taking Algebra 1 or Geometry this year, which is probably many of you, then we would give you a placement test in algebra. If you're taking a more advanced math class, we would give you a different placement test appropriate to the class you're taking. And then based on the placement test results, your standardized test scores, how you're doing in your current school, we make a recommendation for the next year. And most students just take this recommendation, but with others, we might have a follow-up conversation, decide what makes sense. As you might gather already, most decisions at Commonwealth are collaborative, they're not top-down. And so we want to work with you to find the best possible course. If math in the classroom isn't enough, then come to the math room to hear more about math team and the many math competitions the students participate in. In sum, whether math is your favorite subject or not, whether you're a high-flying math student looking for the most challenge, or whether you just want to make sure that you've mastered the basics, we have a math class and a math program for you. And our goal is to help you develop your mathematical thinking to its full potential.